Alex Murdaugh, a once prominent South Carolina lawyer, is now facing more than 80 charges ranging from financial crimes to the murder of his wife and son. The mysterious circumstances surrounding their deaths, as well as the details of the Murdaugh's family's shadowy past, have drawn national attention. For more insight, joining me now is criminal defense attorney Brian Claypool. Brian, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
So Alex Murdaugh pleaded not guilty to the murders of his wife and son. He faces 30 years to life in prison without parole if convicted. Maggie and Paul Murdaugh were found fatally shot in June 2021. What do you see as the most critical facts prosecutors must prove first, Brian?
Hey, Mike, this case looks and smells like a slam dunk for the prosecutors, but not so fast. What they need to prove are two crucial facts. The first is they've got to place Murdaugh at the scene of the crime, right? Because the timeline is as follows. The time of death is 9 o'clock at night. Murdaugh says he doesn't get there till 9:30 after the alleged murders. So prosecutors are going to have to put him there at 9 o'clock. How do they do that? Well, let's look at the GPS tracking of Murdaugh. Let's look at his watch. That would be the evidence to put him there at the scene of the crime. The next crucial fact is, did Murdaugh shoot and kill his wife and son?
Right.
Remember, there were two high-power rifles used. And believe it or not, Mike, what I think's really going to solve this case is what's called blood spatter analysis. In violent crimes, you could look at the pattern of blood spatter on the clothing to determine whether the person shot the gun or not. What I mean by that is close range, high rifle shot will ignite what's called a mist of blood. So if you look at the clothing of Murdaugh, you're going to see the blood and see whether it's misty or whether it's concentrated. Remember, he told 911, I helped with the victims. So if the blood is just concentrated on his clothing, he might have an argument that he didn't deploy the rifles.
So what's the likely Murdaugh defense?
Yeah, Murdaugh's going to argue, first of all, what's my motive? Why am I going to kill my wife? And more importantly, why am I going to kill my son, right? That's the first argument.
Right.
And then the second, I think his best argument, Mike, is that there were two rifles used. That's pretty odd, right? In most murder cases, you have one weapon. So his lawyer is going to argue there were two shooters. He wasn't the shooter. He wasn't even there. And you've got the wrong person, and there might be two killers on the loose.
How does a 37-minute gap in failing to call 911 play with the jury?
Yeah, there's two other devastating facts for Murdaugh. One you've pointed out, which is if your wife and your son are laying there in a pool of blood after being shot close range, you're going to call 911 in like a lickety-split within a second. This gap is going to be just devastating for him. He should have called right away. And then when he called, Mike, he wasn't really that upset about it. He sobbed a little bit. But here's another real critical fact that I think is going to be devastating for Murdaugh. There was no sign of a robbery inside the house. Why is that important? Because it suggests this was a personal crime. This was somebody that really wanted to kill these people, had no interest in robbing the home. And I think that's going to be really, really damaging for Murdaugh.
Obviously, this case is getting national attention. We're speaking about it right now. The prosecution and defense have agreed to a gag order. Is that appropriate?
I don't like gag orders. I think it violates free speech. And more importantly, Mike, in my experience in high-profile cases, you can always vet jurors during jury selection to see, for example, whether they've heard anything about the case. You can do what's called individual voir dire and ask them, hey, have you learned anything about the case? Have you heard anything on TV? Have you seen Mike's show about this case? So you can vet jurors like before the trial starts. I do not like gag orders. I don't think they're appropriate in this situation because you don't have any evidence before the judge right now that the potential jury pool has been contaminated.
Defense attorney Dick Harpootlian is also a state senator. Might political connections help in any way?
Hey, the location of this trial, Mike, is unlike any other. I mean, this family has a 100-year history in South Carolina. They've got a ton of political and legal connections. And boy, I got to tell you, if I'm a prosecutor in this case, I might want to try to move for a change of venue, believe it or not. I'd want to get this case out of this territory where they're in because of the Murdaugh connections and maybe get this in another location in South Carolina or possibly even another state so that you can get a fair trial. Because these small town jury trials, I mean, who knows who and how that might be influenced in determining this case.
Brian Claypool, looking sharp on a Sunday. Thanks for your time and your analysis, buddy.
You bet, Mike. Have a great day.
You too.